Moving into my dream home felt like a victory. A quiet suburban street, a beautiful backyard with a tall wooden fence, and, most importantly, privacy. Or so I thought. One Saturday morning, I decided to enjoy the crisp morning air the way nature intended. Naked. My fence was tall, my backyard was enclosed, and I wasn't bothering a soul. It was peaceful. The sun was warm, the breeze was refreshing, and for once, life felt good. Until I heard her. A shrill voice cut through the serenity like a knife. "Oh my God, that's disgusting!" I turned toward the sound, my peaceful moment shattered. Karen, standing on her second-story balcony, phone in hand, looking mortally offended, as if she had just witnessed a crime against humanity. "You do realize I'm in my own backyard, right?" I called out. Her eyes narrowed. "People can see you." "People? Or you?" I shot back. She gasped like I'd slapped her with my words and stormed inside. I rolled my eyes, assuming she was done with her theatrics. I was wrong. 15 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights illuminated my driveway. I barely had time to throw on some shorts before I opened the door to 2 police officers looking thoroughly uncomfortable. "Sir," one started, clearing his throat, "we got a report about indecent exposure." Karen, she actually called the police on me for being naked in my own fenced yard, and just when I thought it couldn't get more ridiculous, the HOA got involved. If getting the cops called on me wasn't absurd enough, the real slap in the face came the next morning, a bright red envelope taped to my front door. "Notice of violation. Homeowners Association." I ripped it open, skimming the contents. My stomach clenched. "You have been cited for violating HOA Regulation 14B, Public Decency and Community Standards. A fine of $500 has been issued. Payment is due within 14 days to avoid further penalties." I had to read it twice, then a third time. Public decency? In my own damn backyard? Fuming, I stormed down to the neighborhood clubhouse where the HOA held their meetings. If this fine was real, I needed answers, and fast. The second I stepped inside, there she was, perched behind a long folding table like a queen on her throne. Judith. Judith was Karen's final form, the true power behind the HOA's tyranny. Sharp eyes, perfect posture, and a clipboard clutched like a weapon. If Karen was a snitch, Judith was the executioner. I slapped the fine notice onto the table. "Explain this." She barely looked up. "You were in violation of HOA rules regarding public exposure." I scoffed. "I was in my fenced backyard. How is that public?" Judith adjusted her glasses. "If another resident can see you, it is considered public." I clenched my fists. "So, let me get this straight. You're telling me Karen, who went out of her way to spy into my backyard, is the victim here?" Judith didn't blink. "The fine stands." I took a deep breath and smiled. "All right," I said. "Then I guess I'll see you in court." She smirked. HOA disputes aren't handled in court. I leaned in. "Oh, sweetheart, they are when you're breaking the law." Judith might have thought she won, but if she thought I was just going to cough up $500 for existing in my own backyard, she had another thing coming. That night, I sat down with a beer and did what any sane, pissed-off homeowner would do. I started digging. First, I pulled up the HOA bylaws. After skimming through pages of pointless regulations about mailbox colors and acceptable lawn heights, I found the section on public decency. And guess what? Nowhere did it say anything about backyards. It only mentioned front-facing property visible from the street. Strike one, Judith. Next, I dug into Karen's past complaints. A quick search on the neighborhood Facebook group showed I wasn't her first target. She'd filed complaints about a teenager mowing his lawn shirtless, a couple sunbathing in their bikinis, and even an elderly man for wearing a bathrobe while getting his newspaper. Was she a creep or just a professional prude? Finally, I started looking into Judith herself. If Karen was annoying, Judith was dangerous. a dictator in a pantsuit. People hated her, but no one had ever successfully challenged her. That's when I found it. The HOA's financial records. And buried deep in those reports, a suspicious maintenance fund draining thousands of dollars every year with no records of actual work being done. I grinned. Forget fighting my fine. I was about to burn Judith's empire to the ground. I was already furious about the fine. But finding the suspicious maintenance fund in the HOA's financials turned my irritation into full-blown war mode. It didn't take a genius to see something shady was going on. The HOA had been collecting extra fees for neighborhood improvements, yet somehow the sidewalks were still cracked, the community pool was a health hazard, and the park looked like it hadn't been touched in years. So where was the money going? I started asking around, carefully bringing it up with neighbors during casual conversations. Turns out a lot of people had the same suspicions but had been too afraid to push back. One guy, Mark, had been fined over $800 for painting his front door the wrong shade of beige. Another woman, Lisa, got slapped with a $1,200 fine for leaving her trash cans out for 1 extra hour past pickup time. And guess what? Every one of those fines was approved by Judith. I knew then that my little naked backyard incident was just the tip of the iceberg, but I needed proof, solid proof, to take her down. So I did something risky. I dug deeper into the HOA's records, calling in a favor from an old college buddy who worked in real estate law. He helped me go through public filings, property records, and tax reports. And that's when we found the bombshell. The maintenance fund wasn't just shady, it was fraudulent. And worse, Judith was funneling money into a company owned by her own damn husband. It was time to go nuclear. I knew I couldn't take Judith down alone. So I gathered the troops. I printed out every document proving Judith's fraud, the fake invoices, the unexplained withdrawals, the payments to her husband's construction company that had never done a single repair. Then I reached out to the most vocal anti-HOA residents and showed them what I found. Their reaction? Pure outrage. That's when we made a plan. Crash the next HOA meeting. Expose everything in front of the entire neighborhood. Make sure no one could sweep this under the rug. The next HOA meeting was packed. More people showed up than I'd ever seen before. Judith, of course, sat at the front, smug as ever, completely unaware she was about to get obliterated. When the floor opened for community concerns, I stood up, walked to the front, and hooked my laptop up to the projector. Before we discuss anything else, I said, I think everyone here deserves to know exactly where their HOA fees are going. Judith's face instantly dropped. Click. The first slide came up. It was a screenshot of an HOA payment, $10,000 transferred directly into her husband's fake company. Click. Another one. More payments, more fraud, more undeniable proof that she had been stealing from us all. The room erupted. People were yelling, demanding explanations. Karen, who had been sitting smugly near the front, looked like she wanted to disappear. Judith tried to regain control, but it was too late. I dropped the final bombshell. I had already reported everything to the state HOA oversight board and the police. Judith's smug grin vanished. And just like that, the queen had fallen. Less than a week later, the investigation was in full swing. It didn't take long for the authorities to confirm Judith's embezzlement scheme. The HOA board was dissolved, and Judith, she was arrested for fraud, theft, and misuse of HOA funds. Karen, meanwhile, went completely silent. Turns out she had been one of Judith's biggest supporters, and with Judith gone, her power evaporated overnight. She tried filing another complaint about me, but the new HOA board, they dismissed it immediately. And my fine for walking naked in my own backyard? Revoked. The new HOA board even sent out refund checks to everyone who had been unfairly fined under Judith's rule. As for me, I never paid a damn cent. With Judith gone, the neighborhood finally felt like a real community again. The unnecessary fines stopped. The corruption ended. And, most importantly, Karen finally shut the hell up. One afternoon, as I stood in my backyard sipping a beer, fully clothed this time just for fun, I heard a familiar voice from across the fence. "Karen." "You happy now?" she snapped. "You ruined everything." I just smiled. "No, Karen," I said, lifting my beer in a mock toast. "I fixed it." And with that, I turned back toward my house, leaving her fuming behind her fence. Because in the end, the HOA tried to fine me for being naked in my own yard. But all they did was expose themselves. With Judith gone and Karen effectively neutralized, the neighborhood finally felt normal. No more absurd fines, no more HOA dictatorship, and no more nosy neighbors calling the cops for imaginary crimes. The new HOA board, run by actual decent people, reversed every ridiculous rule Judith had put in place. They even cut unnecessary fees, proving what we all suspected. The extra money had been going straight into Judith's pockets. And Karen? She never recovered. Without Judith backing her up, her reign of pettiness crumbled. She tried filing complaints about unapproved Christmas decorations, about kids playing too loudly at the park, even about someone parking their truck facing the wrong way. The new board ignored her. The community ignored her. Eventually, Karen put her house up for sale. No one was surprised. The day she moved out, I happened to be outside. She shot me one last glare as she slammed her car door, but I just gave her a cheerful wave. "Checkmate, Karen." After everything, I decided to run for a position on the HOA board, not because I wanted power, but because I never wanted another Judith running the show again. I only stayed on for a year, just long enough to make sure things stayed fair. By the time I stepped down, the neighborhood was exactly what I had imagined when I first moved in. Peaceful, friendly, no longer controlled by a group of wannabe tyrants. And the best part? I could finally walk around my backyard however I damn well pleased, without some nosy neighbor calling the cops. The HOA tried to fine me for being naked in my own yard. But in the end, I was the one who left them exposed, and it felt amazing. With Karen gone and Judith behind bars, you'd think the drama was over. But HOAs don't just die quietly, they implode. For weeks after Judith's arrest, the remaining board members scrambled to cover their tracks. Emails were deleted, documents mysteriously went missing, and one particularly desperate board member even tried claiming he had no idea where the money had gone. Except, by then, the state HOA Oversight Board was already digging through everything. Turns out, Judith wasn't the only one dipping into HOA funds. Several board members had approved their own home repairs under the neighborhood improvement budget. Thousands of dollars worth of personal renovations, all paid for with our fees. And when the audit was finished, the entire HOA board was dissolved. With no leadership left, the homeowners took a vote. Did we want to elect a new HOA, or did we want to abolish it entirely? The result? A landslide victory for burning that nightmare to the ground. No more HOA, no more stupid fines, no more ridiculous rules about mailbox colors or how long you could leave your car in the driveway. We were finally free. Even though the HOA was gone, Judith wasn't done paying for her crimes. The fraud charges alone would have been bad, but the embezzlement, tax evasion, and falsified contracts made things so much worse. The trial was a spectacle. Neighbors packed the courtroom just to see the woman who had terrorized them for years finally get what she deserved. Judith's defense, blaming everyone but herself. She claimed she was misled by her husband's company, that it was just a misunderstanding, that she had only been following HOA policy. The jury didn't buy a word of it. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Her husband got 10. Their construction company was shut down, and as an extra cherry on top, They were ordered to pay back every single dollar they stole from the community. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Karen, of course, was nowhere to be seen. By then, she had moved to a different neighborhood, one with an even stricter HOA. I can only imagine how that worked out for her. 1 year later, the neighborhood looked better than ever. Without HOA funds being siphoned into Judith's pockets, people actually had money to improve their own homes. Lawns were maintained, houses were repainted, and the community park was finally renovated properly. And best of all, I could enjoy my backyard in peace. No cops, no HOA fines, no nosy neighbors peeking over the fence. Just me, my coffee, and the morning sun. Exactly the way it was meant to be. The HOA tried to fine me for being naked in my own yard, but in the end, I was the one who left them exposed, and damn, did it feel good. With the HOA gone, the neighborhood felt alive for the first time. People who had been afraid to even step out of line before were now taking back control. Instead of an overbearing board dictating every little thing, we had actual community meetings. If someone had a problem, we worked it out like adults. No ridiculous fines, no power-hungry dictators, just neighbors helping neighbors. The old HOA clubhouse, we voted to turn it into a real community center. Now, instead of hosting HOA meetings full of condescending lectures, it was being used for barbecues, movie nights, and neighborhood get-togethers. And with Judith's fraud money finally returned, we fixed the sidewalks, replaced streetlights, and even got the neighborhood pool reopened. For the first time since I moved in, it actually felt like home. One afternoon, about 6 months after Judith's conviction, I was outside grilling when I got an unexpected visitor. Mark, the guy who had been fined for painting his door the wrong color, walked up with a beer in hand. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Always." I motioned for him to sit. He cracked open his drink and smirked. "Thought you'd want to know. Someone tried to bring back the HOA. I almost dropped my spatula. "Wait, what?" "Yeah. Some idiot started a petition talking about restoring order and preserving the community standards. I didn't even have to ask who started it." "Karen?" Mark laughed. "Yup. She actually thought people would want an HOA again." I grinned. "Shh. How many signatures did she get?" "Shh." Mark smirked. 2, hers and her new husband's. I nearly died laughing. Apparently, Karen had remarried to some poor guy who probably had no idea what he was in for. She had moved just a few streets over and was still trying to control everyone. But this time, no one listened. She was completely ignored, and just like that, the last remnant of the old HOA finally died. With the HOA long gone, the neighborhood flourished. Property values went up, people actually enjoyed their homes, and best of all, there was no more HOA nonsense to deal with. And me? I lived exactly how I wanted. No Karen, no Judith, no ridiculous fines, just peace, freedom, and my damn backyard. One evening, as I sat outside watching the sunset with a cold drink in my hand, I took a deep breath and smiled. The HOA had tried to control me. They tried to fine me. They even tried to ruin my life. But in the end, I won, and best of all, I could finally be naked in my own backyard without a care in the world.